Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The summer was cold and very rainy. Clouds became a familiar sight for its inhabitants. The village was located not far from the city, so it had a comfortable infrastructure and the charm of nature. In the center, two large stores, church, village council, and around the boundless fields with wheat, tennis forest, a beautiful rivulet. Through the village past the railroad line, once a day a suburban train rushed past. All day long the little station was lively. In winter, women carried pies, donuts, freshly baked kindling to the trains. In summer, there was a trade in fruits and vegetables from the vegetable gardens. Peter, whom the whole neighborhood called no other name than tractor driver, stopped near a familiar peddler to buy some seeds. He was on his way home from work from the village garage. Today, he had left his mechanical horse for maintenance. It felt strange, as if he had forgotten something. Never left a man behind. But I'm going to my tractor as if I had no hands. He thought, as if reading his thoughts. Adriana, handing him a bag of seeds, wryly remarked what kind of people came to see me. And on my own 2 feet, I'm faint, but not sarcastic and baba. The tractor driver snapped at me. All you want is to talk, no matter what. The main thing is to scratch your meat. And I'm like a bone in your throat. To all your female tribe. Why did the head of the tribe smirk? Because I haven't married any of you. So you're angry. Have you forgotten that I'm living with a man? What do I need you for? You forgot that only the night before last you broke into my house. Asked me about our tender friendship last month. I whispered in her ear. Are you silent? As burn with this man, starting with 100 grams, so you fly to me. You won't forget the path. Adriana frowned and turned away from Peter. Peter was the first guy in the village. Tall, broad-shouldered blonde with blue eyes and curly hair. He could play the guitar too. The girls were standing in line. Anyway, he's a good guy. He tasted a couple of seeds. They're good, Adriana, but don't be mad. Get on with your life and you'll be all right. He looked up at the sky. Looks like the clouds are coming again. It's raining. Have a nice day. I'm tired today. 2 weeks ago, we worked like hell. We slept in trailers. The foreman told us to go home and gave everyone the day off for tomorrow. Despite the fact that the time was over 0 o'clock, no one stayed. We quickly packed up and got on the road to our native village without any accidents. With dreams of a cozy bed, soft pillows of his blood, and you with your nonsense to the working people and your eyes only poked at the departing man. And he and Seeds leisurely wandered along the village houses on the asphalted path. Then he turned to the field pipe and quickened his step. The approach of bad weather Peter felt in his gut immediately began to catch his bones. He sighed heavily, lamented the fact that there was almost no heat this year. He closed the wicket behind him to the fiddler and entered the house. He lived alone. He went out with a lot of girls and got married late, already over 30. But the spouse to marry wanted a city life, prosperous, bright, and she ran away with a visiting small businessman who brought fresh bread from his bakery to the village store. How did Jenna live? He didn't know now. Pride didn't allow him to ask, and there wasn't much interest. During 5 years of married life, he had become familiar with her character and preferences. His wife tended to idleness, loved money and entertainment. Where did the simple-minded girl get such a craving? Take a wild guess. Peter felt sorry for her at one time. I thought she was miserable, but she's a sly fox. And she turned out to be. Before he met her, he was working. He quietly ignored the laughs of his coworkers. They called him eternal. That's what they called him. He was almost 38 years old, and he was still single. His parents had long since passed away, leaving him a good house on the outskirts of the village. Right behind him, a clear river and forest spread out under the enemy. In love with fishing, Peter used to leave his tractor at the house and rush to primitive places. For rafting on the river, he had a boat, and for fishing, he had a whole fishing arsenal. Fishing rods, hooks, and spinning rods, a comfortable inflatable mattress, a kettle, a folding knife, and other utensils. And there was no greater joy for a man than to fish away from people. Such a journey of a few days would inspire him for a long time. Or that passion for this hobby, tired and satisfied, returned. Peter Homeland. And then the man began another hunt and hunting for skirts. Peter had different and country maidens, blood and milk and city skinny fugitives and figure skaters, thick lips and pumped in all places madams, and Mademoiselle's female tribe reached out to a strong country man, stately with a powerful torso, wiry muscular arms. Peter was a titbit for voluptuous or lonely ladies, and his appearance was textured, strong-willed chin, golden curls, open forehead, clear blue eyes and teeth. His smile left no one indifferent, and the tractor driver's soul was wide, as they say. He could go for a walk. He could play the harmonica to make mature women cry and tango with young girls. In general, it could seem that he was an inveterate heartthrob and Casanova. But no, just did not look into the soul. He was clinging to his pants and human gut little. Babes were interested in and did not guess his partners that this brat has long been longing for true love. He wanted to start a family and bring up children. In his yard lived an old greyhound Alma, abandoned in the forest in winter by city hunters. And at home he sheltered 3 cats, striped, red, and white. And Peter loved children very much. Couples left their offspring for him to look after. Peter sat with them like a babysitter, while they went to the movies or went shopping in town. He added so that all the village children, when they saw him in the street, stretched their hands to the giant. After all, he could ride on himself and play catch-up and toss in the air, but he could not meet his woman Peter. I decided that since my heart did not twitch when I was young, now probably it was not destined. He jumped all over women, but he didn't get any serious relationships. He was alone in the yard. He came home late one night, drunk as a skunk, took a photo calendar with a famous young man on it, a photo calendar with a famous comedian, and started talking to him. I'm bitter. Everyone has a family, children, and I'm like a finger, all alone in the world. Many other things, he said. And he shed a tear, and then he fell asleep that night with a calendar in his hands. And he dreamed as if he were near the windows in the field on soft blood under the trees in the shade. 12 o'clock, and his lunch is next to him at a clean rehearsal. A strip of black bread young, green with heads of onions, radish, and also scatter red boiled potatoes, country eggs, and partisans, thin slices of lard with a good meat layer of fat. Lifted up and ate with appetite, considering the boundless wind skiss, the field, and the clear blue sky above him, next to him tractor of his stand's engine, shut off rests his breadwinner. And then he sees the ears at his side stirring, and the comedian from the portrait materialized in front of him. He poked him in the chest and said, "Don't worry, remember, soon everything will change in your destiny. For the best." Peter woke up in the morning and a familiar face looked at him from the photo. The man smiled. He remembered the drunken conversation with the calendar and the dream. He'd made it. He was surprised. I talked to pictures at night. However, since that day, the longing and anxiety went away, and Peter began to wait for what was promised to him. A change of life for the better. Not really, and so it left me curious for a laugh. How could it be that things had changed for him? The single way of life became habitual, and in early September, a trainee from the agricultural technical school appeared in the village. And her name was Jenna, and she was young and pretty. Peter was 20 years older than her father. She had a lot of suitors from the countryside. They flocked to the young girl like bees to honey. You'd think a city slicker was new. It's hot, I get it. You can't get them with pressure. I made friends with her. I drove her in the morning on a tractor to a distant mill, and in the evening picked her up and took her to the village, where the chairman allocated her a room at the village council. One evening, Peter picked up the girl, and before getting into the tractor, they stood in the field for a while, admiring the red-pink sunset, the first stars and young ones sunning themselves in the sky. There was the scent of herbs in the air and a special autumn silence. Soon the cold weather would come, the work in the fields would be over, and Jenna would have to leave for town. Peter looked at the girl without taking his eyes off her. Okay, I'm all pretty, smelling of hay and honey. The saucer's eyes were bright gray, looking at him trustingly, as if waiting for help. The whole atmosphere around them disposed to frankness, and told him Jenna that she got pregnant from the local suitor, and he left her in such a position. She cried, hugged him tightly, leaned her head on his shoulders, and such a romantic mood swept over the man that he pressed the girl to him, gently stroked her shoulders, and kissed her on the lips. The man was afraid to frighten her away, and that state of happiness, which seemed like a misty haze, encompassed him, fell evil into his heart. The hope of a normal family also appeared. A nobility surged up in him, and immediately he offered the girl to marry him. Jenna didn't seem surprised. She accepted easily, and Peter's coworkers were genuinely happy for him. Well, at last you were about Koltsov howling, so they sang at his wedding as if for the last time. The celebration turned out to be wide and hearty, and the young couple's life was going well at first. Jenna told her husband that the pregnancy had terminated. It was due to stressful experiences. It was only later that Peter found out that there was no such thing at all, and all the wife to marry. In the city, she was teased for saying that she had collected all the beds, but had not found a husband. So she decided to rub their noses in it. She saw a sentimental tractor driver and immediately realized she had to take him. Then I often wondered how to take him. A young girl. I'm a fool, Peter complained. I got married once and immediately stepped on a rake. He sighed heavily and went to the window. Still, the jam was building. The rain had densely dined after a hard day's work. Peter climbed under a warm blanket and fell soundly asleep. The overwork had not gone to waste, and even in the realm of Morphia, Peter continued to drive his tractor. Driving along the golden field, dedicated to the bright rays of the sun, suddenly something very strange happens. In an instant, the road is enveloped in darkness, appearing in the light of the headlights. The road changes as if in a movie or montage with a change of frame. Around the unsightly darkness overboard mournfully blows the wind on the ground. The fog begins to flow. Peter looks back, none of his own are there, as if dissolved, and the lights of the village behind appeared. What is this attack? The reasonable explanation comes to the man's mind. He got weak and fell asleep, and that's what he saw. He starts the tractor, turns around and starts moving back towards the village. He pulls up, and again there's a mystery. The scenario repeats itself. Darkness all around in the light of the headlights, bushes, and behind. Peter turns off the engine, takes out a bottle of water, splashes it on his face and head. I don't understand what's going on. It's like believing in an evil force. They're taking me around in circles. The clock is ticking, and I am stuck in one place. With such thoughts, Peter left the tractor and went home on foot. He collapsed on the bed and passed out. In my dream, I saw myself walking in the direction of the village along a path familiar from childhood, where I knew every tree, sighed at the aroma of fresh grass, admired the windows of the forest in the distance. Suddenly, the air thickens around him. Within seconds, it becomes so dense that Peter can't see anything around him. He is overcome with intense anxiety. At a loss, he stops and tries in vain to see the road in the darkness. Suddenly, a woman's hand reaches out to him through the cloud curtain. She beckons him after her. A chilling terror grips the man. But like a mesmerized man, he follows her. In time, the personal veil dissipates, and he sees the unfamiliar face of the woman. She stares intently into his eyes and insistently nods her head in the direction looming ahead of his house, points to a bench near an old barn. Peter takes a few steps forward, turns around, and is surprised to find that no one is around. The man follows the path further, but it suddenly turns into a thin stream that murmurs its waters and goes right under the barn. Peter is stuck in a dream, shuddering, and finally wakes up, wiping his sweat. He was awakened by the sound of the wind. It was disturbing the poles of the ones with big tens of birch, aspen, bird cherry, and tree branches. The force was beating on the window. Suddenly, the street lamps in the whole village went out, and the light was cut off. Pitch black darkness descended on the land. A violent thunderstorm raged behind. Everything around was shaking. It seemed that the sky was cracking into pieces. Close thunder struck, and the man shuddered. The room glowed with flashes of lightning. It was raining like a bucket. Peter couldn't sleep a wink. Anxiety gripped the downpour, and then it subsided and then intensified. I must be afraid and unable to sleep because of the deafening rumble, he thought. Suddenly, lightning struck somewhere close by. But after a while, there was a pause. The rain eased, the storm abated. Suddenly, Peter put his hand over his eyes. What's that? There was a burst across the room. A bright light, silvery white. Peter had never seen anything like it in his life. An oil painting, grandiose, mesmerizing. Very close, about 10 meters outside the bedroom window. He saw a ball-shaped, glowing object floating in the air. It was about 15 centimeters in size. The airy misty cloud moved slowly. It seemed to the man that the vision was swaying from side to side. It receded and the glow grew smaller. It drew closer and the room filled with light. Peter fell into a state of stupor. He couldn't move, but still he found the strength and ducked under the blanket, then popped out of there. Every 5 seconds, he felt that he was confronted from below by a natural phenomenon of some universal mystery. For a split second, the balloon hung. It froze in the air, as if studying the man on the other side of the ocean, and then smoothly vibrating began to move through the air. Everything lasted for about 5 minutes. Then the phenomenon jerked to the side and disappeared without a trace. Darkness fell. Only the sounds of rain could be heard. There were rare flashes of lightning in the distance. The rain stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Dawn was breaking over the village. Bright pink and purple streaks, alternating with each other, lit up the sky. Dumbfounded by what he saw, Peter cautiously approached the window, opened it. The smell of fresh greenery wafted into the room. He went back to bed, put his hand under the pillow, and finally fell asleep. The next day, the man talked excitedly about the ball lightning. Now he was not afraid at all. Who are the men in the brigade? Oh, who laughed, not believing what you want, guys. It's raining this year, there's no salvation. They're slowing down the harvest. Tonight they promise rain again. That's what happened. It was after midnight when Peter went home from the fields. Suddenly the sky was ablaze with lightning, flashing in bizarrely zigzagging dashes of thunder. It seemed as if the entire universe wanted to fall into tatters. Then streams of water collapsed from the heavens, covering everything around with it. Peter shuddered a couple times at the wheel and then stopped. He was very tired and in a hurry to get home. Suddenly he shuddered. There was a movement nearby. Then he thought he saw a fireball in the distance. Peter stopped and realized his mistake. Only unseemly darkness loomed ahead. Lightning striking mine. A strange thunderstorm, he wondered. I haven't seen anything like it in a long time. It was an unsightly night. It seemed to him that he was the only witness to a powerful manifestation of natural forces. Peter stood on the side of the road for a few minutes. He was jerked out of his deep reverie by a movement on the road ahead. He looked closely. It was the figure of a woman coming toward him. When he saw her close, he realized that the tramp was performing a dance to the rain music that she understood. It was either her crying or moaning, or her thrusts and laughter, that reached the man. The sight was fantastic and eerie. I wish the rain would stop, he thought. For the second day, it's been dashing after me. Peter even rubbed his eyes. Was it just me? Meanwhile, the stranger continued to move through the downpour, ignoring the storm. Her body shuddered in a nervous, ritualistic dance. It was then that Peter noticed that the girl had a baby in her arms. The man jumped into the tractor, threw his work jacket over his head, immediately jumped off the ground and hurried toward her. You need to hide. Come to my place. The child will get sick, he shouted, trying to break the noise of the rain. Through the downpour, the man did not hear the young woman's reply. He held out his arms towards her. She handed him the little girl. Pitifully, she smiled and followed him. In the inn, he found a clean, large towel and wrapped it around the child well, always kept it ready for bathing in the river. And this year, he never had to. It was all the weather's fault. It was capricious. He looked at the baby in his arms. It was a girl, crying all the time, but very quietly. I guess her strength was wearing off. Peter drove them to his house and put the key in the woman's hands. He went to fetch the paramedic. He realized that Peter had been wandering along the highway with her child for more than an hour. Though the rain was warm, it was very long. It was easy to get cold and simple. The downpour was still beating furiously on the tractor. Streams of water were flowing down the road. Peter picked up the pace. The way lay back to the field. There Helen, the village paramedic, was staying there today with her lover. Peter himself had seen the woman dive into his carriage since the evening. The tractor driver's fatigue was imposing and confusing his consciousness. He fought hard against sleep the whole way. When the man reached the place, physically he felt better. He jumped sharply out of the car and ran to the construction wagon at the edge of the field in an excited state. Peter didn't realize he was banging on the window with all his might. "Did you eat too many pancakes? It's night, and you're banging like crazy. I opened the tape. Come on, it's urgent. I picked up a woman and a child on the highway. The girl's a baby. I think she's sick. I'll get my bag and get dressed." "Wait," the paramedic commanded. Soon she was already sitting in the tractor next to Peter. He told her to hold on and gave her gas. "We'll be there soon," he said, glancing at the victorious woman. Back at home, Peter was at a loss for words. A drenched child lay on the bed, and the woman he had picked up was spinning around the room singing. Frowning, her eyebrows flew upward in surprise. But she was not confused. Rushed to examine the baby. First thing she did was to take off all her wet feathers. Peter took a soft towel out of the closet and half-handed it to her. She put her finger to the baby's back and put it to her lips. Her breathing was normal. After a few minutes, she stated, then wiped the baby, tangled it in the towel, and handed it to Peter. Pressed it to her chest, warmed the bottle. "Gotta find the grease mixture, too." She approached the girl, a skinny brunette with big black eyes, swaying from side to side. Her gaze froze. Helen waved her hand in front of her face. There was no reaction. The lady was definitely in shock. "Let's get the baby to a children's hospital, and the woman to a mental institution." Haladina pulled the purse hanging on the stranger's shoulder. Tanya resisted. Inside was a passport and a birth certificate. So one thing at least, the paramedic smiled nicely. In front of us, the child's mother Kelly, and the girl Lisa in the column of the father empty-handed. "Okay, Peter, give the foreman a car. Ask. He's home now, but he's laying the other's breasts, and I'll stay here. We can't leave them alone to rest." When he left the house, there was light over the village. The earth was alive. Birds were singing. He was amazed at the change in nature. It was as if the elements that had raged during the night had not existed. The clouds graciously gave way to the rising sun, which put everything in its place. The long-awaited warm day was dawning. What did he have in store for him today? What surprise! He drove his car up to Peter's house. Peter got out Helen with a young girl, and her daughter settled in the cabin. Escorted them to the medical facility. On arrival, she said the girl was very lucky not to catch pneumonia. And the mother's psychotic. It takes a long time to be treated and then observed at the place of residence. Peter was worried about both. No one would let him see the girl, of course. The nurses on duty only reassured him. They said there was no danger to her health, but the head doctor said he could see Kelly, said it would be good for her. The sight of the asylum had a depressing effect on Peter. He was an optimist, and he didn't like to be depressed. But here he even became afraid of physically healthy people in the captivity of their psyche. While Kelly was being treated, he regularly brought her groceries. Soon she began to feel better, and the young woman was allowed to go for walks. At the hospital, there was a small yard with greenery. Emmy neighbors ate next, and was still quite young, but made the area cozy. That's where they met. The girl was not much of a talker, but with time she became more open. One day, having chosen a bench in the back of the square, Kelly and Peter settled down next to each other. The girl raised her dark, velvet eyes to him. "I never remembered you, Peter. That day with the rain. But somehow I feel safe in your presence. Please listen to me." Peter nodded. "You know, I believe in letting you into the hidden corners of my soul. You will understand everything. You are a soulful man. I suffered a lot from my mother. She didn't want you to realize your dream." Yeah, she overreacted. She was born into a simple family. Lived in a quiet country town and a house on the outskirts of town. She was always dreaming of the first vivid memories that my mother shared with me, this kindergarten, and shrouded in a haze, romance, the personality of a music worker. The woman seemed like a girl wizard. Not of this world, she appeared once-a-week extravaganza in an airy outfit with a light gas scarf that accomplished the image of high-heeled shoes. They looked crystal in a child's eyes. Even the educator's name sounded some kind of ethereal music, Angelina. Wendy's mom's throat covered when she opened the lid of the piano and a fairy tale was born. It was astonishing to the ear. Sounds emerged beneath her light hand movements and filled the space. Air castles appeared in the girl's imagination. Mythical characters survived there. It is not surprising that the impressionable Wendy began to dream of playing a musical instrument, but this desire remained buried in her dreams. Soon my grandfather died. My grandmother withdrew into her grief. She worked at the factory to support herself, and my mother kept a vegetable garden, rabbits, chickens. She also sewed to order. Nights became Mom's childhood no fun. She grew up inconspicuous, shy, insecure, and all the time longed for music. After graduating from school, immediately went to work at the factory to her mother. 5 years of perfect labor passed and the unbelievable happened. Wendy was sent from the enterprise to study at the institute. It was located in a large city. There she found herself for the first time in her life. Of course, it captivated her imagination. The ancient architecture of former merchant houses in the center, powerful streets, cathedrals gilded with domes, shadows, and alleys planted with spruce and birch trees, and the gift of fate. The building of the institute was opposite the conservatory. The sweet voices of wind instruments, harp, flute, saxophone, and piano, carried from the open windows into the fall square. After class, Wendy loved to sit on the bench and listen to the music. That's how she immersed herself in her dream. The years flew by. Mom finished her studies, got her diploma. She returned to her home harbor. She was transferred to work in the laboratory and was again rewarded for her hard work. Now she was given a voucher to a sanatorium. At the resort, the girl was lucky to touch the captivating world of music again. Every evening in the assembly hall of the sanatorium, young pianist gave concerts for vacationers. He seemed to Luba then the ideal man, real knight. Undoubtedly, he noticed the girl with adoration, looking at him. The musician was bribed by this, and he approached her and got acquainted. His name was Tom. It is clear that the mother became his most devoted fan and admirers of his talent. Tom for this allowed after concerts to walk with him to his house. And soon Wendy became like a shadow everywhere to accompany his idol. However, the vacation came to an end. She returned home. There the girl terribly longed for her pianist, then and began to write him letters. They remained unanswered. But one day, returning from work, she saw the adored genius near her house. He had arrived. It was the happiest moment in Mom's life. Grandmother did not share her joy, and the same day in the evening at dinner, directly in the forehead, asked the guest about the purpose of his appearance. The intelligent musician did not give an answer. But soon Tom gallantly added on one knee and giving Luba a silver ring asked for her hand. The girl could not believe her happiness. In the rapture she became dizzy. From the overflow of higher feelings, she cried. Soon the bride and groom signed and played a modest wedding. Tom began to work in the Palace of Culture. He liked to tell his provincial colleagues about his great talent, emphasizing what unique hands he had, what graceful long fingers. Meanwhile, my mother became pregnant with me with delight. She shared this glad tidings with her husband, but he did not share it. The young woman was instructed by him to go for an abortion. She cried all night. She fell asleep just before dawn, resigned to her husband's decision. In the morning, he was blown away. All that was left was a scanty note. Yes, yes. She ran away from such a life in a backwater, where there's no place to realize her genius. This is not what I dreamed of. Goodbye. After reading the message, my mother fainted. She and I never heard from that man again. Physically, however, Wendy was strong and soon recovered from the emotional shock. She gave birth on time and without complications. It took her a long time to choose a name for her baby girl, named her Kelly. My mother and grandmother raised and educated me as if I were porcelain. The accent was on my hand, which they carefully guarded from the houses, nurturing my father's talent in me. I couldn't play in the sandbox, pick up snow to make snowballs. I wasn't allowed to wash dishes, do laundry, cook meals. And from an early age, I was put in music school. Grandmother, yielding to the persuasions of my mother, handed over all her savings to buy an instrument. The piano was installed in a prominent place in the hall by the window. Mom carefully dusted it every day. She was carried away in her thoughts. Her daughter would fulfill her dream. It would be happiness. The musical accompaniment would accompany her whole life. It would be by all means at all costs. In public school, from the first day I was exempt from all labor duties, cleaning classrooms, subotniks, and the like. Immediately after lessons I took home, changed one briefcase for another, and went to the museum. The fact that no one asked my opinion and desire, I got used to it. But the wild thing was that in the class together with me there were girls and boys who also received musical education, but they led normal lives. They had childhood, walks, splinters on their hands, fingers frozen in the cold. My mom wouldn't let me do anything, obsessed with her dream. I couldn't even participate in the school theater. She thought it was unworthy of her daughter's talent. So I became an outcast, forced to ignore my peers. I was disliked by my childhood group for the same reason I never had any friends. I grew up surrounded by sheet music, violin clefs, gams, adagio, and solfeggio. As a teenager, my classmates openly laughed at me. I tried to break out of the vicious circle by proving to my mom that I dreamed of something of my own and didn't want to do music, but she ignored all my needs. Her plans were only to continue her musical education. And then I started to have psychological problems. I didn't talk much, and soon I became completely withdrawn. And after the death of my grandmother, left alone with my mother and her tyranny, I found lapses in memory. And most likely, I'm a somnambulist. I started waking up in different places, even though I was in my own bed. One early morning, I was horrified to see the piano smashed to pieces. Unconsciously, I took revenge on the instrument for years of willfulness. I don't know what my mother would have done to me at that moment if I hadn't run away. I left my music school graduation certificate on the piano with a note, "Mom, is your dream come true? This document is rightfully yours. I'll go to technical school." In the city, I quietly studied there for 3 years, choosing to grow up. I dare to major in construction here. See what kind of hands I have. Masocchists are to never sit at the piano again. All this time, I had no contact with my mom. Even when I got married, I didn't give her my address. I was afraid of the reproaches of mental oppression. True, I wrote letters to her regularly. After graduating from technical school, I left with my fiancé to his hometown. There she married him, gave birth to Lisa. But the psychological problems remained. At the beginning of my married life, everything seemed to disappear, and then pregnancy, childbirth, and everything escalated. My husband discovered I was walking around at night. He left us. He wouldn't even give up our daughter. Wouldn't let me write him down as the father. Said he didn't want crazy people in his family. What can I say? He finished me off with my daughter. I worked nights as a plasterer, beating her in the stroller, swinging her leg beside me. What can you do? We have to live somehow. It's been like that for almost 6 months. I decided to return to my native land. We were robbed on the road, thrown on the side of the road. That's where you picked me up. Thank you, you saved me. Who knows what would have happened to us if it hadn't been for you? Probably dead. And now I've been examined here and found to have a neurological disease. Rare and frightening. So I'm forced to plead with you. I need to keep Lisa out of an orphanage. I need you to find my mother. I can't see her. But Wendy, I'll write down the address. I'm afraid she'll want to ruin her granddaughter like she ruined me in favor of empty dreams. But I have nowhere to go. Will you help? Of course, Kelly answered the man. I feel responsible for the people found in the rain. He returned to Lviv. In deep thought, he went to the Brokas, but took a few days at his own expense. He didn't want to let the foreman go. He had a lot of work to do, but he gave in. The man asked for a long shake in the train, and then in the bus, finally arrived in his native town Ol. He found Lubov Nevzhin's house not at once. Streets, winding, neglected on the outskirts. opened him a gray-haired woman. Eyes big as a saucer, black look, sad, trim, modestly dressed. Peter said hello and told her what had brought him to her. Wendy ached and staggered back. I never thought Helen would call me. Yes, you come through, Nevisian, sat the guest at the table. Gave him a hearty tea face, moved closer, eating strawberries, jam, and honey on a plate with sliced fresh loaf. Over the conversation and acquaintance, the man learned that Wendy had as much idea about her daughter's life as she did about becoming a grandmother. She handed Peter an envelope with a letter from her daughter, but she hesitated to initiate contact with Kelly, afraid of being rejected. Now, through the story of the stranger who became her own, she realized how much damage she had done to her own family with her violence, and that only by choice. People should choose their own affairs, professions, and hobbies. How did Kelly get away from me? She told Peter. So the country collapsed in an instant. The factory was closed, bankrupt. It was a tragic time. I was left without a job. I survived by selling household utensils from home, dishes, sets, crystal. My own vegetable garden, of course, helped me grow potatoes and vegetables. And here I was walking from the bazaar, thinking that I could buy dinner with the proceeds. It started to rain. I ran into the entrance of the first house, and in the darkness ran into someone, frightened, turned on the flashlight. And in front of me, the girl Zareknaya told me that she hid here from the bad weather. I was upset. I invited her to warm herself. We got to know each other. It turned out that she had come from the village to study here, and they didn't give her a dormitory. In search of shelter, she got lost in a town she didn't know very well. I thought about it and rented Tatiana a room. Helen's daughter was empty anyway, so I got an apartment, which modestly paid for accommodation, but brought village lard, milk, sour cream to the house. And everyone shared in the good fortune. The need receded. We became close. Tanya, she is simple, very light, pleasant in communication. She grew up in a religious family. In her room, which I gave to her, icons, left brought from home. At first it seemed strange to me that the girl prayed before meals in the morning and when she went to bed. When shall I go to get my granddaughter with you? Peter, may I? I live now, I'm not poor, and I have a pension and a job. Yes, you can go in the evening in time for the suburban, and there it's a short walk. The children's hospital is in the center of town, and the dispensary is on the outskirts. And the street will meet me. Let me take home with Hope, the woman asked. Of course, I think she's forgiven me. She's a good girl. Oh, and guilty. I cried in front of her. Wendy, will I be able to redeem myself, Peter? She looked up at the guest with sad eyes, God willing, to encourage him. He her packed quickly, arrived at the train at the right time. They bought tickets, listening to the rumble of the wheels of the train. They admired nature through the window. Wendy and Peter looked at each other occasionally and were silent. Everyone was thinking about their own things. In Minsk, the grandmother happily took her little treasure in her arms. The baby's face was smeared with something. Wendy washed her and changed into a new one. That bought on the way to communion with her granddaughter lighted her heart with joy. It was evident by the amusement on the woman's face. Peter also started a lezginka, sitting on a bench in the hospital square. Feeding from a bottle they had been given in the nursery. Soon the baby sweetly fell asleep while playing on his mighty chest, and an hour later mother and daughter came out of the central entrance holding hands, smiling at each other. But thank God, everything was resolved well, Peter thought. The women approached him. Kelly took her daughter from Peter's arms. Tears ran down her cheeks. Thank you, Peter. She thanked him. You're an amazing man, and an amazing man. That's what I would say, Wendy added. You put us back together as a family? Come on, Peter was embarrassed. I am so God's fate, smiled Nevzhin. I realized it exactly when I turned to the Virgin Mary. I read a prayer and listened to it. I can't explain it in words, but at that time my soul turned over. I started to go to temples often, hurried to the service, and fell in love with the choir. Tears flowed beyond my will. I became a parishioner of this temple with prayer. Peace settled in her soul, but not tangible and comprehensible to the mind. The strength came to learn, To love truly not hypocritical neighbors, to accept with selfishness, to fight. I spent a lot of energy in my life on the phantom dream of music. But instead of working hard myself and getting closer to this world, to participate, I went the other way. Only now it's come to me that a quiet soul is the best music in the world. Why have you joined the temple choir? Peter suggested it. Yes, I've been in it for about a year now. I have a good voice and ear. I approached them. Oh, that's the finger of God. The man marveled. After a warm farewell, he looked at the women's backs for a long time, then sighed happily, got up from the bench, and walked toward the bus station. There was his own story waiting for him there, a cozy home and a hard but beloved job. With this, the man was in perfect harmony. He loved and knew his work, and in the village he was appreciated and respected for this. However, as usual, there is a bad luck for the old woman. Georgie had an accident in the field. He received multiple fractures in his leg. A number of operations were performed, and little by little, the man began to recover. Once, returning from the clinic, he was standing on the highway, voting. The bus had already left, and the next one had to wait for a while. It was hot June, even under the awning of the bus stop. The people around him did not pay attention to him. He waved his crutch, trying to stop anyone. There were no attempts. A gray Opel drove by, but then it backed up and slowed down. There was a girl behind the wheel. Peter regarded her with interest and appreciation. She bent over the back of the seat and opened the back door on the curbside. He stood beside her at a loss, wondering how to get into the car. Help, the stranger asked. Peter shook his head negatively. He barely squeezed in sideways and put his crutches beside him. I have to go that way to the village. He showed his hand to the thief. The girl smiled. I'll take you there in a breeze. She drove the car well, smoothly changed speeds. What's your business here? Have not seen before, he asked. Peter was intrigued. It was not often in their backwoods pretty girls appeared. The man looked at her all the way. Nice features, Greek profile, long dark hair down to her waist. She turned in green eyes for a moment. A flicker of slyness. Where are you going? She asked again. Her voice was low and husky, quite pleasant and mesmerizing. He showed me where to go, explained where his house was, parked the car at the gate. The girl got out, walked around it, and helped Peter out of there, took his crutches and gave him a hand. He climbed out, thanked her. Peter opened the wicket and beckoned her to follow him. Didn't hesitate to have a nice cup of tea. With me it will be by the way, I won't refuse. Peter got around the house better than he did on the street. Adapted to the kettle for 6 months. Arranged vases of candy and jam on the table. Thinly sliced a fresh loaf of bread that he had bought in town. The girl sat opposite, and he was able to get a better look at her thin face with correct features, open forehead, Sobianin, and eyebrows. Slightly slanted eyes with long lashes, plump lips, accurate chin. Figure. The stranger had a frail neck and long arms. What's your name with the visitor? If it weren't for you, it certainly would be now. From the heat and the pain. Lisa, but to drink tea or juice, it's delicious. On rags. The girl drank with pleasure and went to the yard of the barn, sat there on a bench. Peter cleared the table and went out after her. Percy came and stood beside her. Lisa leaned back against the wall, closed her eyes. She had a detached look. She didn't wake up right away. Coming out of the book, she smiled. Can I sit here? You have 5 more minutes here, then I'll leave. Peter nodded. Only I'll go into the house. I'm tired of Lezginka. Go. Peter went into the bedroom and lay down. Immediately fell asleep, not hearing the sounds of the engine and the cars driving away. And nice girls man after and did not remember. The meeting was accidental, so he was surprised when she appeared near his house again. Peter heard the rumble of a car, saw Lisa through the window. She came into the yard. She had a large bag in her hands, which she lowered onto the porch. Peter limped to the door, swung it open. The guests again settled on the bench. A lovely slyness flickered in her gaze. She lifted her head, stretched slightly. But this is for you. Lisa stood up and opened her bag. There were groceries in there. Dora's face stretched. What's the daughter for? Don't be shy. It's cheaper in town. Then here. And you can't go there, you can't see. The main thing is a lot. Thanks, I'll give you the money. No, it's okay. It's a gift. Put it in the fridge. Can I help you? Yeah, I can handle it. Sit down and rest. Let me see the big one. There was a lot of stuff in it. Cheese, sausage, stew, canned fish, and vegetables. In a couple of minutes, Peter's small old refrigerator was filled to the brim with them. While he was pulling everything out and distributing it, he looked at the girl through the window. Lisa froze in one pose. Peter put the kettle on the stove for some soup. He wanted to feed the girl. How did he finish it? He took out the crumbs and cut the cheese and sausage on a plate. He heard she was leaving. Till I got out of the house, I didn't know what to think of compassion. Strong girl, though. Too bad I didn't get her in the mail. But she disappears so fast, and she comes out of nowhere, too. This meeting disturbed Peter. It seemed extraordinary, even though he'd seen Lisa. A couple of times he was surprised by the young girl's demeanor of unperturbed calmness. No matter how hard Peter tried to put thoughts of her out of his mind, thinking that she might never appear. They arose again. In the evenings, he sat on the bench for a long time, immersed in his thoughts. And at night, he slept badly. Lisa came again. Peter was in the yard at that time. The girl smiled at him openly and good-naturedly, already as a close acquaintance. In the depths of her green eyes played the reflections of the bright summer sun. The look was warm. She said hello nonchalantly, and Peter suddenly became verbose. Thank you for your help with the groceries. How much do I owe you? It's embarrassing, he asked, stammering. Lisa looked him in the face. Please, you don't need anything, she replied. What should I call you? Oh, whatever you like. Uncle Peter the tractor driver, or Peter. It's fine, and you're fine. I can't think of anything better. Peter, let me come and sit here in your yard sometimes. It's no big deal. Come over, Lisa, whenever you want. I'm home all the time. This time she sat on the bench with her arms spread and closed her eyes. Peter went into the house and occasionally looked at her. The girl did not live in the sun under a light summer breeze. The man tried to invite her for a cup of tea, but she refused and said goodbye to him. For more than a week, the girl did not appear, and Peter caught himself thinking that he missed Lisa. When she arrived, he couldn't hide the joy on his face. The first thing Lisa asked him was how he was feeling. She inquired about your sore leg. I can examine it. Such interest in his problem surprised Peter. But as if under hypnosis, he showed her the sore leg. The girl took out of her purse a piece of clean cloth, some solution, paper napkins. Trust my hands, she said. Her touch had a healing power. Peter felt it at once, as if something new and unexplored, but graceful and strong, had entered his flesh. Outwardly, her manipulations looked like an ordinary massage. But Peter realized it was more than that. He could not explain his sensations clearly. Lisa came twice a week and treated him. Each time, Peter enjoyed her warmth and gentle strength. He realized that his well-being was getting better day by day. Often the girl delivered groceries, sometimes volunteered to mop the floors of the house, picked up large loads of laundry, and took them to town for washing, returning them to perfect wives. It was time for Peter to go back to work. The leg was as good as new. More was gone. The doctors, looking at the x-rays, marveled at how well the bones had fused and how quickly the right amount of movement in the limb had been restored. Peter, with redoubled energy, began to do his favorite work. He jumped into the tractor, where the sunlight fell in streaks on his loaded sheets. His oil-soaked hands started the engine on his rough face. His eyes sparkled victoriously. To himself, he would seem a hero, and he felt that any task was within his reach. Once again, as before. For lunch again, his favorite potatoes with smoked Celtic. He would leave her, praising her. Then gazed up into the sky at the clouds twisted into bizarre figures. It felt good and breathed so easily. He watched the eagle soar over the field in the hot air. Peter didn't take his eyes off it until it was hidden in the thick outermost tree, lonely, standing by the roadside. Life is a wonderful thing, joyfully said the tractor driver, drinking his favorite song. So day by day winter came. It was snowy and severe. There was a lot of work to do. Peter left the engine of the tractor running overnight. In the morning, Frost promised, as usual, you can't start it. It would have to be heated. And this is time and effort, every day is like another. When outside, pulled deeper on his head woolen cap, or something from behind the gift through a hood on top and forward. In winter, the chairman transferred him to the snowplow, so that he would not get bored without work. Tomorrow we will have to clear the road to the neighboring village. Snowfalls in this winter were not less than the rains in the past summer and fall. That's why Peter did not get out of the cabin for days and days, sometimes finishing late at night. And at 4 o'clock the phone cackled. Come on, Peter, save the day. Neighbors swamped or something else. Peter, swearing profusely, rushed to help. It happened to pull out cars from snowdrifts. There were times when he had to dig out the road to villages. People locked in the snowy captivity became harsh and stingy. Without auto shops and a letter carrier, they lived the worst of all for the sick. The paramedic could only get there on skis. Ambulance rejected and calls, because anyway not to reach, and there is no one. The medical center was closed after optimization. So just yesterday, he went to shovel the white captivity from the snow. God in his eyes, suddenly a big hillock appeared on the way. The tractor driver, with a shovel under the light of headlights, quickly dug out an old foreign car. I looked out the window and there was the driver. I shake his hand, dropped his head on the steering wheel and slept an eternal sleep. Peter called the traffic police, described the situation. I moved on. We've got to do our own thing, clean the road. Christmas is coming. The snow is hard as concrete. Sometimes I had to stand. The wheels decided to turbocharge the turbo function. The diesel tractor roared. Here we go, finally. Turned the front blade and rushed at the enemy. Snow layers were removed, and as if on oil steel blades surrendered with a squeak. Peter felt the excitement. He coped with the elements. And then the engine stalled. It's a couple of kilometers from the highway. Peter looked at the fuel gauge. Fuel's gone, stretching both tanks to 0. Not far behind the pine trees, God is peeking through. The loafers. The tractor driver rushed to it, and they're covered with tarpaulin, barrels of diesel fuel. To his joy, the car started easily. He drove up to the tractor, pumped the fuel with an electric pump, cleaned his black hands with snow, wiped the rest of the dirt with a rag, and plowed all night like Papa Carlo. In the morning, buses, private cars and trucks should go along the highway. Yes, I wanted to rest, but the sowing season was ahead. As they say, the day feeds the year. We have to work on all fields, and there are only a few tractor drivers. But every year, the rooks start to walk the field with an important look. The main business of his life begins. The sun warms the soil and a wide ruler descends. And so it goes. Didn't have time to get into the house, to brush the snow off his shoes, and there's the familiar noise of the rider's engine. Lissa, despite the fatigue of the madly at once to meet Lisa, opened Peter in the New Year's Eve, when the city was preparing for the holiday, and people hurried to buy provisions and gifts in supermarkets, and at bus stops jostled in lines. The city was drowning in bustle. Life was bustling. She picked up groceries in her store. She had worked there for a long time. It was possible to buy on account of her salary. She bought Peter a warm scarf and went home. By evening, she planned to go to Olkan. It had snowed so much the day before that she couldn't dig out her horse. She put it off for later. Now she was in a dilemma whether to wait for the bus or to walk home. While she was thinking, a car parked nearby, and she got in the back. She didn't think about the fact that the cab was in the wrong place. Why next to the sidewalk and not at the bus stop? Where are we going? He asked. The cab started easily and drove leisurely along the avenue. Retro songs were playing on the radio. The driver was silent. Suddenly, though, he asked, curious, "You work? That's a strange question." She responded. However, the interlocutor did not lag behind. "Come on. There are a lot of young people out of work these days. You're interestingly married." "I'm sorry," and after a pause. "But you're not one of those gloomy depressives. Your eyes are shining. They're beautiful. Are you looking at me? Relax, I'm a grown man. I know what it's like to be with a girl, not a couple. It's just that time flies faster and more pleasant when we talk." The driver looked at her in the mirror and drove on in silence, for which Lisa was very grateful. The snow-covered city flashed outside the window. Different colored lights were dressing up the shop windows. There was a light frost outside, and the car was warm and cozy. The girl's eyes began to slip shut. She woke up to a sudden braking. The cab driver turned to her wide cheekbones and face and smiled full mouth. Maybe a cell phone, or some money, or a license plate. Lisa laughed, holding out the bills to him. "Happy New Year." Slamming the door, she swung the wicket door open and stepped into the house. Here it is bountiful, warmth, and coziness close at hand. "Are you here yet?" Grandma Wendy knew how to guess her as far as she could. "I came to get some goodies for the table. How are you doing?" "I've been beating myself up and feeding myself, and looking good in the yard. I'm going to the old ladies. Whose street parties? It's not the month of May. You all quarrel, freeze, and something. And looking for adventures on them. It's not without that. You're bored with just one dog. You're not alone, Grandma. You have me." Lisa walked over to the woman and fixed her shoulder-length hair. "Aha, she's always missing. Can't even wait for you after work." "Yeah, I can, and I just got asked out on a date." The girl decided to switch her grandmother's attention from grousing to pleasant topics and told her about the cab driver. "Lisa, it's common knowledge. You're irresistible. So it's no surprise that a man would fall for you." "Oh, come on, the cabbie's a one-time thing." "Why don't you tell me who you're going out with? You know them all." "What's the topic of discussion? You don't respect gossip, do you?" "Order?" "No. My granddaughter's on our street." The other day, some dashing teenagers toppled a bench at the end of the street. Bins by the roadside are full. The queen of the family is stirring things up, like they're rockin' the whole thing. They're making noise, they're smoking. Keeping the yards awake, we gotta do something. And the other socializing needs to be active too. You're my grandma. Since I stopped singing in the choir, I'm busy with social interests. Yeah, Lisa without them. I don't know how I would have lifted you up. My neighbors helped me. We had such a friendship, we overcame adversity together. We had no men. We became like family to each other. As now I remember my terrible days as I hugged you, pressed against your cheek and closing my eyes, began to breathe, forcing myself deeply to calm down. Tears choked me. Only in you I felt my soulmate. Two lonelinesses found each other. I thought then, what should I do with her? What kind of parent am I to a baby? Life has shown me that no daughter of violence has tortured me. Will I be able to keep my granddaughter from ruining her life? Good, you were calm. You sang peacefully in your sleep and smiled as if you were helping. My heart was clenched with pity, love, and love on the first day that you and I were left alone. I was in so much pain that I carried you into the bedroom. I laid you on the bed and opened your warm balls. You didn't move. The dream was sweet and not vicious. I lay down beside you and forgot myself in an anxious guidance in my head, one by one heavy thoughts about how to lift my granddaughter. That pension was small, and how much was required? Would I have the health and strength? But I wanted so much to help you. I wanted us to be a real family. But in the middle of the night, you cried loudly from emotional distress. The question of what to feed the baby had completely slipped my mind. I frantically remembered who on the street and in which house had infants. Right across the street lived my age Maria. A couple of times we were brought together by fate. Daughters studied at the same school. But as it often happens, they were very different. Her fate was still that, however, still eventually settled down. She married and gave birth to a son. She got a strict, loving spouse. She turned out to be a good mother and wife. Then, leaving you hungry on the bed, I rushed to an acquaintance and knocked on her house. "Who's there?" "Did you hear a sleepy voice?" "Maria, forgive me for being an old fool, but I'm having a force major, honestly." "It's you, Wendy." "Wait, I'll be right out. My people are asleep." In a couple of minutes, Maria was listening to me. "Oh, what grief forbid, she. Let's go to your place. I have experience with babies. Now only the formula is intercepted we have sometimes when feeding. Even though there's plenty of milk. Sometimes he'll be gone for a while, and he'll be hungry. Look, I made a suggestion. She's the one we don't have enough of sometimes. Why don't we feed her to yours?" "Yes, of course, thank you," I said. "I thank you for your care and kindness. Maria has really helped a lot in taking care of you. You know her, the woman is full of energy. And somehow, without too much pathos and loud words, she became a friend and counselor for us." I watched with admiration how Maria managed her family and did not neglect us. She would bring us milk with our wives, change diapers and rock us, and sing us a song. "It was always a great help to have you with me. If I had business to attend to, she'd take me for a walk and give me a bath. All in all, she was a woman of gold. One night, after I put you to bed, I went to get her and asked her to go for a walk. She was also free from domestic chores, so she gladly agreed. A passerby along the policy. We got to talking. 'Maria, I look at you and admire you. Everything in your hands is on fire, everything in your mind. So much fire in you. Why are you alone?' 'Yes, how can I tell you?' You remember, my hand was separate and kind of family-oriented. I lived behind him like a stone wall and never knew any trouble. He brought good money into the house. He loved my daughter and respected me. And then everything happened. He went to a sanatorium for treatment, and there he found a young nurse who offered herself to him. And he couldn't resist. He didn't refuse. He went to her. They lived well at first, until the hammer ran away to someone else. Genya, someone came to his senses and came back to me, and I gave him my resignation, and I didn't accept it. I can't live with such a man. Wendy, don't think I'm so proud, but I don't have a heart for him. I'm burned out. There's no point in such a life, only not to fire myself, and so the road to his grandchild is open to him. I don't hinder him. He looks at me with his eyes like a beaten dog, and I feel sorry for him, but I have no love for him, and his deed is always in my memory. Thank God I'm lucky to have a son-in-law. He earns good money. Now he's saving up for an apartment, so he'll bring him into the family and they'll live separately. And I will only have a guest spot," she laughed. "And you won't be bored." I asked, "You grew up with them?" "Come on, Wendy, they'll still hang out at my place, as they say nowadays, and kiss at the same time, and I'll make them even better guests." When a son-in-law lives with his mother-in-law and doesn't complain, it says a lot. Yes, Maria, you managed to find a common language with him. And I'm unhappy, but I failed as a wife and a mother. What are you saying? I saw everything. I saw it all happen. We weren't friends, but we lived next door to each other. You can't hide a thing in a bag. You were a good, faithful, and kind wife to yours. Kelly in your teeth. And that she left, that was her choice when she was young. But she came back, forgave you. It's hard to say. Character is a big part of it. And you're not Russian. God himself will help, and I won't leave you. And now you have a granddaughter growing up. She'll squeak, and we'll raise a girl. As they say, no matter what steps a cow is sent to, and the phone is still our litter. Thank you, Maria, on a good word. You're 100 times right. My soul has really come to life. At least someone needs my affection, my care, my love. It makes my heart melt and gives me hope. God willing, Lisa will do well in her life. So with our friendship, we outwitted the evil fate of our grandchild. We had and common joys, and wonderful holidays, and attention, and care for each other. When you entered school age, God brought us another woman. She had moved to our street from the high-rise buildings. Her health was not good. Her joints were all aching, because in her younger years, when she was born, her first husband was drunk and beat her and drove her out into the street in the cold. She endured until once in the bitter cold, did not get a lifetime of arthritis, and was not infertile. Then the same drunken husband accused her of having no children. This woman did not bear it, left him, and went nowhere, wandering from apartment to apartment. However, she remarried for great love. Got work in a railroad depot. One machinist caught the eye of an old, tall widower, who saw only his visible beauty and fell in love. The young people had a real deep feeling for each other. They were so good together that every matter seemed to be on their shoulders and all hardships were surmountable. Fully opening life for each other, they valued every moment spent together. Pardon me for being flat, but this is also important in family life. Although each of them had physical experience of intimacy, It was nothing compared to their intimacy. Even the mental image of their partner evoked such desire that the air seemed to heat up around them. Both considered this meeting a gift from heaven. In order not to lose this fairy tale, they got married. Domesticity did not destroy the idyll. On the contrary, the relationship brought them even closer together. In everything they managed to find a compromise and do not quarrel over nothing. And what did he find in this dosha? People were talking, but he knows his own and almost carries her in his arms. She was persuaded to leave the hard work, and she entered the institute in absentia to become a teacher of junior high school and until her retirement. She worked at the school. She was well regarded by her superiors, and the parents of students approved of her work. But how not to praise her? Vanessa, attentive, kind, though strict woman, could find an approach to each pupil. See something special in him or her, good aim to study, help and guide to the path of truth. Of course, there were envious people who slandered her and made her look bad in front of the director. Her initiative and responsibility irritated many people. People didn't want to work. They were being treated, and the desire to fulfill her duties was regarded as drunkenness and insolence. Vanessa stood her ground. She kept her reputation. No one managed to smear her. She'd still be working after retirement. Except for the joints. Wouldn't let her do it. She used to live in the center on the 5th floor in a well-appointed 2-room apartment. Then a woman was left behind. Her husband died alone. After thinking about it, she decided to move into the house to make it easier to go out. She wanted a change of scenery. He was very sad. She exchanged the house with an extra payment and settled here. We noticed the new one at once during our evening promenades around the neighborhood and took her under our guardianship. We explained to her what the local prices were, how and where it was better to pay off the utility bills, in what stores products are edible, inexpensive, fresh, how to get to the local polyclinic. Vanessa was grateful to us and immediately offered her help to tutor children and grandchildren, math, Russian literature. We were very happy with this offer. Especially, I have never been strong in the sciences, although I have received an education. That's how we became friends. We 3 pensioners are intertwined by our difficult female destinies. We are together everywhere, both in business and on vacation. While I'm with Maria at the window in Vanessa's apartment, she is watching the dinner, watching the children, and checking lessons. So we brought the young people to the point of intelligence. And how we went on vacation together? Remember, we only had Maria with a car and a license. Here she drove, and the rest of us were passengers in their company and traveled around the monastery inhabitants, had picnics in cozy forest glades, enjoyed fishing. In summer, escaping from the heat, we took a season ticket to the swimming pool and went there 3 times a week. I remember, of course, that's childhood. Are you incorrigible activists? Lissa marveled, but you've told me all this 10 times already. And though it's interesting, I'm gonna run. Have a good one. At least you'll be back by Christmas, because I'm with you on this holiday. Lissa dug out of the snow of his car and drove Peter nestled against his big and hot chest. The man stroked her silky hair. You see, I was foolish young then in the movies. Ran 2 winter was cold. I was wearing a leopard coat and a knitted cap, and I was running through a snowy square. Hurry up and go to the theater. The movie will be interesting. I sat down comfortably, and next to him he was looking at me in a cadet's uniform, and there was laughter in his eyes. And everything swirled in my memory, except for his face. There was nothing. The plot of the movie, and I do not remember the Admiral only from the thought of him sitting next to me. It became more important than what's on the screen. What's your name? He asked boldly after the screening. Lissa, let's go to the cafeteria for a snack. We'll talk about the movie, the stranger suggested. Yeah, you're wrong. All I could talk about was the title of the movie. We wandered the streets for a long time. He told about the service, about the fact that he came for a vacation, and tomorrow he will leave. It's a shame that he came to this movie theater on the last night. If they'd met earlier, things would have been different behind her eyes. Then I would have proposed to you and you would have become my bride. Nick teased. A proposal in the first few hours of dating. That makes sense to me. What does? That you and I are halves who should be one. You know what I mean? In body and soul. I'm leaving tomorrow. Come to the train. I'll be waiting. Of course, I'm your soulmate at home. I couldn't stand it. I told the whole story to my grandmother. I kept saying, "It's an extraordinary meeting. Lissa, have you seen off any suitors in the army? You write him letters, and there's another one." I listened to myself. It was unbearably good, pitiful, painful, and sweet to see Nick off. As promised, I came and told him I'd given my word to another. I was waiting for him. He looked at me in a way you can't tell. In his eyes, I read Wendy, sadness, and disappointment. Then I ran after the train for a long time and cried. Wet snow, driven by a strong wind, whipped my cheeks, as if exacting revenge for the betrayal I had committed, destroying true love. And then I fell seriously and permanently ill. My grandmother was the only thing that saved me. But I have a gift for getting people out of sickness. I don't know how I do it. I cured people from the inside, but I couldn't rid myself of mental illnesses. I saw Nick again. 5 years after the breakup, not a day went by without thinking about him. With the guy, which I in good conscience waited, we parted. It's not for nothing, they say you can't make love by force. He sensed my aloofness and coldness. He realized it and withdrew. I went to work at the store, cooked and cleaned, as if it had always been like that. But that day, lifting my eyes from the cash register, I saw an attractive man walk in who resembled someone. I could not calculate the customer, scrutinizing the face of the guest. Did you fall asleep or what? I was indignant. No, I wasn't asleep. I recognized the man as Nick. He came closer, still the same laugh in his eyes. Yes, he was. He's handsome, well-groomed, smiling. Dark brown hair with blue eyes, masculine face, straight nose. He looked in my direction. Without hesitating, he glanced at his watch. 7 o'clock sharp. I'm waiting for you near our movie theater. I'm dressed for parade and in a joyful mood. I flew excitedly to my date in a new raw crust dress imitating a lotus flower. Even high heels couldn't keep me on sinful ground. It was like I was arguing. Nick stood with a bouquet of roses. He held them out to me with the words, "Sans, here we go." And then we walked into the movie room. Again, I didn't understand what the movie was about. We kissed in the dark, and then we ran away. He took me to a restaurant. Champagne, gourmet appetizers, fruit, hops were going to my head. Then he began to tell me about himself. After college, he signed up for contract service. Divorced. He was embarrassed a second time. I was horrified, and he laughed. Frankly, it wasn't as serious as we had made it out to be. I hoped we would meet again. I kept looking into my favorite eyes between us melted years of separation, as if we had parted a couple of hours ago. And he's still the same with his eyes mixed in, with a crooked, ironic smile, with a loving heart open towards her. How much is he hiding inside of him? There's no telling. From then on, we never parted again. He came to the store, and we, as if stupefied by the first sense of teenagers, wandered the streets, went to cozy cafes, looking for privacy and a corner there. Grandmother, feeling guilty about our former parting, and in my affliction after him read my sweet granddaughter, "You seem to have blossomed with him. Grab happiness while it lasts. You're really two halves, but don't live in sin. Get married," she said. Soon Nick moved me into his apartment. Grandmother cried then, but let me go with good wishes. For a whole year, the sweet dream lasted, and I didn't want to wake up from it. I didn't believe it at first. It couldn't go on like this for long. I waited for his displeasure, his fated gaze. I cooked it wrong, stroked it wrong, said the wrong thing. But he just laughed and held me tight in his arms. He'd cook, do our laundry, iron our clothes. He liked to look at me when I didn't notice it, said he admired my every movement. I was shocked. How experienced and wise he was. He gave me bouquets and gifts for every occasion. We've only seen them from our husbands as daughters-in-law. Happy what-side colleagues at the store. And recently I began to notice that Nick was looking for solitude. He's become pensive. I talk to him, but he doesn't respond. He's in his own head. He seems to be paying attention to his face. I don't like to hear them ask questions. Allah, so as not to offend. But I'm curious. I asked him if he was in pain. No, he says. Everything is fine. The nose of the machine in his beautiful eyes went out. At the beginning of summer, before we met you, my grandmother invited us to her birthday party. She made a cake and salads. And suddenly Nick said sadly, I can't go to the service. You go alone. We went to the store together to buy a present. We picked out a beautiful handbag for Grandma. Nick walked me to her house. On impulse, he hugged me, pressed me against him, stroked my hair very gently. It felt like some important words wanted to come out of his mouth, but he didn't say anything. It's okay, I asked. Careful, everything is fine. Go and tell Lyubov Pavlovna. A bow and congratulations from me. I have to go. He sighed heavily. On duty, Nick kissed me and stood in one place. Until I walked into the yard. It was a birthday party. Grandma's birthday party was very heartwarming. Gathered all her acquaintances. Loyal friends from the plant colleagues came and neighbors' congratulatory speeches, wishes. Then we were left alone, remembered the bright moments of grandmother's life, and just talked about everything. I cleaned my room, washed the dishes. Back in my and Nick's apartment, deep in the night, there was a strange silence on the stairs. The key clicked in the lock. I realized my lover wasn't there. I rushed to the phone, dialed my grandmother's number. Nick had left me. That can't be. Gone, Grandma, left. Gone, and the note. No, only the money on the table in a neat stack. The landlady's this month. How could it be? It was love, like in novels. For a long time, I hoped in things to find an explanation for Nick's departure. The letter, the note, the shuffling, the books, the magazines. I realized it was in vain, but I had hope. I called him at the unit, and they said he'd quit. I couldn't understand why he'd done it. Everything was going so well. Weeks and months passed. I lived in the dark. I didn't even know where the man I adored was. Was he alive? And then yesterday, on Christmas Eve, after a hard day's work, my colleague Anna called me into the back room. Follow me, sweetheart. I got something to talk to you about. I'm looking at you, all gray and transparent. You don't eat, you don't drink. Your face is blank. I recognized him when he came in here, didn't I? You're Nick. And then I watched from one side. We're his ex-wife. My other classmate went to school in the same village. He's been courting her since she was young. Since high school, you look alike. He got married for the first time in the army. He went AWOL and got a girl pregnant. So he wrote that he had to get married, Nancy. Then he left her. The deceit was revealed that some lady commander wanted pants. Together, they fooled Nick. He went back to his place with his girlfriend. They fell in love again. They lived and broke up. Nancy was pretty. Her beauty made her hot. Sometimes she fell ill with richer men. I found out from the right people. He came back to live with her. When I heard that, I almost fainted from sobbing. Lisa and leaned against the wall to keep from falling down. Anya, meanwhile, had smothered the cigarette butt. My tender jars rubbed them under their noses for a long time and continued. That one got sick a lot, say here, he decided that he should bring her to the end. You were ashamed to say that, weren't you? I believed her. She always had up-to-date information on all sorts of things. The girl had acquaintances and friendships in the city and beyond. And the lady from poor and rich circles communicated with her. She knew how to listen attentively and was generous with the truth. And Nick has a compassionate nature. That's his style. In the end, she said, don't tear your soul out. You can't get it back. And don't take offense. I don't judge. I would have done the same thing myself. Well, maybe I would. I didn't argue. Thank you. At least that clears it up. Worse than not knowing. And that's why I've given up looking for notes or signs. Now I have to get used to living alone. So I came to you for comfort. My soul still hurts. Oh, Lisa. I held her close to Peter. Why didn't you say something before? My leg was as good as new. I could dance. And you're the one who flew in. Yes, it's hard. I remember the time we spent together on New Year's Eve decorating the tree and dancing under it. I used to bring you branches from it. Remember, I used to put them in a vase and decorate them with candy. You don't have any toys, but I brought you some of the ones I picked out with Nick. I can't bear to look at them. I'm afraid my heartstrings are breaking. Here's a silver glitter ball. Here's a goldfish, here's a house covered in snow. The angel's gone. He bought it last year and gave it to me as a present. Look how much it looks like you. Do you find it? I was surprised at the time. I'm no angel. No, it's about looks, he continued. Look, green eyes, like your dark curls. But there's still no portrait resemblance. Objected I, but fantasized you imagined our resemblance. Of course I did. I just see it that way. I see a lot of you in nature and in things. Stubbornly stood my ground. So he took a souvenir of him looking like me. What do you think? Lisa asked Peter. Most likely as a memento. He wanted to keep our moments in his head so he could feel a piece of me in another life. That's nice. May the angels of heaven help him. Thank fate for such a bright feeling. It was beautiful. Good girl Lisa, who's so wise and wicked. Her own. Come on, Peter, let's go to my place for Christmas. I'll introduce you to Grandma. It's more fun together, you'll go. I will. Why shouldn't I accept such an offer? Peter was driving with Lisa on the same highway he cleaned yesterday. Oh well, it would be good for him to visit and useful. Anything's better than alone. Oh God, Peter. Wendy Genia shook her hands when she saw an old acquaintance on her doorstep on Christmas Day. It seems that the Creator has brought us together again in life. Do you two know each other? Lisa was surprised. So you know him even though you can't remember this meeting. This man helped us to be together. Granddaughter will tell her. Yes, wondered the man, scratching his head. So this is what grew out of that. He threw meaningfully and glanced at the girl. At the table, they discussed the vicissitudes of life for a long time. Everyone thought it was amazing what had happened in the past. But the main thing was that God had sent Lisa with her gift to the sick Peter. Everyone regarded it as a reward for his noble deed in the past and his help to Oli. Every species resembled a young woman, sighed at the same time and thought about their own. They were roused from their stupor by the sound of the chimes. Peter champagne, Lisa candlelight. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. As the saying goes, you spend Christmas the way you see it. It worked in Peter's life. He celebrated with women. That's why a news story happened to him, a very personal one. In life, you don't get anything with this love thing. Out of the blue, it showed itself to Peter. He could not think that at his age, with already established habits, he could become a groom. You lived, a man who socialized with a narrow circle of people. He got close to Lisa as a daughter from time to time with her grandmother. Sometimes the foreman would drop by the can for a beer and talk about his women. That's pretty much it. And then Mr. Great Accident, or as people believe, the creator of the universe, intervened, destroyed Peter's usual way of life, and changed the course of his life. It was all because of his passion for fishing. Peter loved to sit with a rod on the river bank at any time of the year. However, it happened in the summer, when walking through the woods was a great pleasure for a man. Green crowns were rustling overhead. Birds were counting and sunbeams were playing in the waves of the local river. Somehow he discovered a place where the lines were running. Fish, it's a rare, tasty, tender place. It was a long way down the river from the village in the middle of nowhere. The edges of these Peter knew, but never fished in this side. And so one of the villagers led him there. It was quiet and beautiful there, though it seemed wild in this place that you are alone in the world of nature. And all the tricks of civilization were only brought to life. Not only lines were pressed there, but also mushrooms and berries could be picked. It's a habit. Peter pocket the cunning line's special feed made and threw in the cherished waterhole went. That is, in a remote place for several days. Only then on the dark, still on the slide, began to catch. In the beginning only Karas went, and even after a week on the hand was easy. Yellow-green and finely scaled shimmering green. And then on Peter pecked larger fish stuck to any new place. Unknown to him lady is not rural, who did not know where from. He her, you see, she liked to swim here in a deserted place. All the water the lady was confused and the fish. She died once. In the morning, the man managed to fish out a couple of 3 blades, and then she was already spinning not far away, sharply bolt them into the water from the waves that she created. The lilies swayed and swam. Ah, you abyss, cussed Peter. Fool, shouted. Don't you have a place on the river? You found a place to swim. and she just squinted and splashed in the water 3 meters away from the dots. He was yelling, cursing. But it's not weak with a woman. All to no avail. Into the bushes. No, look for the whistles. The forest is big waving hotly. To hell with her. I went into the river myself with my head, all alone fish swimming, all frightened. And the sun was coming down, and quickly lost the river. The beak stopped, all the fish hid at depth, or on the other bank of the nest, where pines and spruces lined up in an impassable wall. But still the man was angry. A dashing lady, she's attached to him. How not afraid to climb more often made him angry, and she was getting away from a serious conversation. She was running. One of our days, a woman came to his fishing spot. It was an afternoon. Peter bathed and took a shot before dinner, waiting for the evening to end. He lay on the grass sunbathing. It was a hot summer that year. He hears splashes. Aha, the lady went into the water. He came closer. And when she came out of the water, his throat was dry from what he saw. The swimmer was all naked, like the day she was born. Well, completely naked in the clear afternoon sun illuminated her entire body large. But, in amazement, he stared at her, unable to look away. And she's shamelessly straight to him, looking at his face and only smiling. Her hair is wet, bright red, she pushes it back, and the light of the sun penetrates through it. And her lips are half open, juicy scarlet, and her eyes are laughing. Light brown with a yellow cast, a body like this waiting for a man's hands and caresses. She was well built, despite her fullness, like a pussycat. Everything about her was just right. Oh, it's not far to sin, Peter thought at the time. Go away. Vision and boredom. The redhead, as if heard his thoughts, so in the nude and passed by. Into the forest headed, only everyone was looking back, and her eyes were laughing. Walking a step, Eva teased. Around her butterflies fly, grasshoppers jump. She looks at the man over her shoulder with slyness and keeps silent. A coquette. After that, the woman did not appear on the far bank. And Peter realized that she had caught his eye. He was grieving. One day he had a drink with his neighbors and went back to his house. Suddenly in the dark he bumped into someone and felt it. And she was a red-headed mermaid. He recognized her breath, felt her touch, her loose hair, and that was it. From that moment on, they were so in love, just like in the books. So he fell in love with the stranger and asked her to marry him. He found out later that her name was Nancy. The woman came to visit her relatives, a native Muscovite herself, only in the capital. Now the lady rarely traveled, but settled near her husband. She was 10 years younger than her wife. At first she sat at home watching her husband through the window when he'd come back from the fields, and then she took a job as a paramedic. Education allowed. Helen and the foreman left the village. He'd been floundering between his women for 20 years and finally made up his mind. And so that the people of the village wouldn't poke them in the eye and judge them in vain. They went to the east in the taiga. Peter was happy. Now a real loving wife. He had children, but he didn't manage to give birth. But his son from the first marriage visited Nancy, and Lissa didn't forget him. And they were welcoming and loving. Sometimes in a thunderstorm, Peter would jump up in the marital bed. In the middle of the night, she threatened him that he saw a girl with a baby dancing by the roadside. Nadia then stroked his unruly gray hair, laid the man to the lush chest, and he forgot in sweet with not until dawn. The man was lucky to marry Lisa and Lisa to become a planted father, to become and her children as grandchildren to nurse. Long her personal happiness sought, but love came into the life of a young woman. The standards of upbringing that the 3 elderly ladies gave her were strikingly different from those of today. It was hard to find a couple. Her good-naturedness, openness, naivety were taken for weakness. Often gullibility beauty used people. Her image, as if from classical literature, beckoned its appeal. But also required an understanding of the work of the heart and mind. Relationships with such a girl could not be easy, so approach her could not everyone. Meet more decent ones. There are such too believe and do not think that she is a dog. The close ones have a developed sense of self. She just won't get involved with the shallow ones. Yes, Wendy, loyal friends. I'm not going to argue. I hope God will help us, the woman replied. Only Lissa, after her fiasco with Nick, was in no hurry to get involved with men. She explained it to her elderly ladies by saying that she was busy with business and simply had no time, but then sincerely confessed to her grandmother that she had not found a man who would be to her heart, and so she doesn't want to be with someone else. But no sooner had the women burned out about it. How did they realize the girl had someone? Wendy knew a change was coming. As soon as she saw her granddaughter in her favorite outfit in front of the mirror, Lisa was gorgeous in it. The white new dress with the floral print really suited her. It cost her white textile booties. Here the young woman did not yield to her grandmother, who persuaded her to change them for classic shoes with a heel. In clothes, she preferred comfort. "All bye-bye native," laughed Lisa, leaving the house. Her grandmother watched her through the open window, inhaling the sociable scent of white tortoise shell. A date in the spring. What could be better than that? Good luck to you, my favorite. Such thoughts ran through his wife's mind. Lisa was always late, so she arrived at the place later than the appointed time. But the young man met her with a smile and a bouquet of roses. She boldly stepped towards him, dazzled by his admiration. "And these are flowers for you. A movie or a walk? Not a movie. I do not like long then promenade." Invited the guy. "I won't say no." Lisa agreed. They held hands and could not talk to each other until the evening. James was interested in everything related to the past and present. The girl, he caught every word of her story, and she admired his tact, the ability to carry subtle self-irony and external data. Tall of stature with a figure of dark hair and green eyes. His movements were characterized by clarity, and not hurried, but speech with precision and inspiration. He is a young, middle-aged businessman. Smart, persistent, but unobtrusively wealthy, but not boastful of his wealth, open, good-natured, and in love. Walked into Lisa's store, and from the first minute, he captured her attention and gained her trust. These two were made for each other. Their tastes and interests preferences coincided. Only a week of acquaintance, and it was enough for them to realize one simple truth. They need each other like air. Suddenly, a heavy downpour hit the city, and the couple got drenched. They ran into a cafe, drank Serbian brandy with coffee, and said James, without thinking, made his favorite proposal. Beautiful and unconventional. She found the engagement ring in a small box near the pastries he had sent her and her grandmother for breakfast. Next to it was a note: "Become mine, and you'll never cry. I can not only make money, I can forge happiness. Anyway, I'm the prince." Lisa kept this note. She showed it to her kids. Daddy's masterpiece. That's what they called it. One day they went to the sea as a family. It was an active family vacation with dolphinarium, them then organs, and jet skis. Their sons are now grown up. Sam and Martin are 15 and 10 years old. He, on the other hand, needed his independence. One night, both boys went to the movies. Nearby, but without their parents. James and Lisa didn't waste any time alone with each other. They went for a walk by the sea. The sound of the surf and the sun coming out overhead. Peace. I'm frozen far away from being within sight all the time. What poked Lisa's husband on the cheek? She wasn't surprised. That's what he's all about, James. Next to her, he's always the brave, lovesick boy. Lisa looked at him warmly. She walked to the shore, looked into the distance. There were footsteps behind her. She turned around. The wind played with her hair, and it fell on her face. Behind them, she couldn't see who was in front of her. The strong gust had died down. Standing next to her was Nick. Lisa gasped in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Yeah, I'm at work." He was embarrassed, nodding at the rescue machine. "I've been watching you for 3 days from afar. You're happy, I can tell. I knew even then that you'd be fine. And you weren't wrong," Lisa confirmed it. "How's your wife and kids?" "Yeah, I'm alone. It's a shame, you're a good man." "I'm sorry, it's time." "Yes, I know they're waiting for you. Take it." He clenched his winning fist. In the palm of his hand was the New Year's angel. "It's yours. Thank you. Keep it as a memento. That's what I wanted you to think of me when you looked at it. And forgive me if I am grateful to life for our love. But I don't live in the past." She gently squeezed the man's firm fingers with her hand, covering the figurine. "All the best." Lissa stepped around the man and walked confidently towards the waterfront. There on the bridge stood James. He waved at her. Lightly, he ran up the steps. She moved closer to her husband, hugged and kissed him. He wrapped his arms gently around her waist, holding a bouquet of roses and 2 popsicles of setting sun. Illuminated their silhouettes, casting long shadows on the wide sidewalk.